Arya Voss stood at the edge of the bustling interstellar bazaar on Cygnus 4, her eyes scanning the horizon where ancient ruins melded with the neon glow of modernity. The air was thick with the sense of exotic spices and the hum of alien dialects, a cacophony that barely masked her frustration. "Still think this is a wild gannet chase, Arya?" asked Jex, her companion and an ex-pilot with a knack for trouble. "Not a chase, Jex. A hunt," Arya replied, brushing a strand of hair from her face, her gaze never leaving the stall ahead where artifacts piled like common junk glittered under the artificial lights. The stall owner, a gnarled being from the outer rim, eyed them with suspicion as they approached. "Find what you seek, or seek not to find," he rasped, his voice like gravel. Arya smiled thinly. "I seek nothing but a fragment of the Zavar," she stated, watching his eyes for any flicker of recognition. The mention of the vanished species often evoked fear, or in some rare cases, curiosity. Today, it brought a flash of fear. "Zavar? Bad luck, that name." "Nothing here for you," the vendor hissed, starting to turn away. With a swift move, Arya placed a handful of galactic credits on the makeshift counter, the clink of metal on wood echoing slightly louder than necessary. "Everyone has something to hide," she said, her voice low and compelling. "And everyone has a price." The alien hesitated, then sighed, reaching beneath the counter to pull out a small, metallic object covered in ancient runic scripts that Arya recognized immediately as Zavar. "This is it?" she asked, her heart racing as she held the relic in her gloved hands. "It's one of the last pieces out of the Zavar systems before they disappeared," the vendor murmured, now avoiding her gaze. "Disappeared or were disappeared?" Jex chimed in, his tone light but his eyes sharp. The vendor shrugged, a universal gesture of dismissal. Arya examined the artifact closer, feeling the weight of history in her hands. It was a small, intricately carved communicator, used by the Zavar fleet commanders. A piece of the puzzle she had been chasing for years. "Let's get back to the ship. We need to examine this without prying eyes," Arya suggested, tucking the artifact securely in her bag. As they navigated through the crowded market, Jex kept his voice low. "You think it's real?" "It's real. And it's a map," she replied without looking at him. Back aboard their ship, the Nomad, Arya wasted no time setting up her equipment in the cramped space they called a lab. The artifact was connected to an array of screens and devices, humming to life as ancient technology interfaced with the new. "What kind of map?" Jex asked, peering over her shoulder. "Not where, Jex. When," Arya corrected, her fingers dancing across the controls. The screens flickered, then displayed a series of stellar coordinates and a timestamp, dated back to the last known appearance of the Zavar fleet. "You're saying this thing can lead us to them?" Jex's skepticism was palpable. "No. It already has," Arya said, a smile tugging at her lips. She pointed at the screen where a remote system flickered into view. "This isn't just any system. It's where the Zavar staged their last stand against the humans." "And you think the answers to their disappearance are there?" Jex's tone was a mix of awe and disbelief. "More than answers, Jex. Proof," Arya asserted, her eyes alight with the thrill of the hunt. "Proof of what humanity did to them." The journey to the coordinates was fraught with tension. Cyberspace chatter about a human archaeologist chasing ghost stories had started to circulate, and not all were dismissive. Some were dangerously curious. As the Nomad entered the desolate system, the remnants of a massive space battle loomed before them, derelict ships and shattered moons, silent testimonials of a forgotten conflict. "By the stars, Arya, this is a graveyard," Jex murmured, his usual bravado dimmed by the sight. "Every graveyard has its ghosts, Jex." "And its secrets," Arya replied, her scanner beeping as it detected an energy signature unusual for such a barren place. They landed on what remained of a moon, its surface scarred by weapons of immense power. Following the signal, they found a buried facility, its doors sealed but not impervious to human ingenuity or desperation. Inside, the air was stale, the silence a stark contrast to the market's chaos. Hallways lined with holographic archives and abandoned tech led them deeper into the heart of Zavar secrets. Whatever we find here, Arya started, her torchlight sweeping over a door with security measures still active, changes everything. Jex nodded, his earlier skepticism replaced by a resolve as hardened as the steel walls surrounding them. Let's find out what scared humanity enough to erase an entire species. With a final glance at each other, they breached the door, stepping into a room that promised answers and, perhaps, the beginning of a new chapter in human history, one as tumultuous as it was transformative. The first section builds up the mystery and adventure as Arya pursues her quest to uncover the truth behind the disappearance of the Zavar, setting the stage for revelations that challenge the very foundation of human superiority in the galaxy. Arya Voss crouched low, her fingers brushing the dust off an ancient console within the heart of the derelict Zavar facility. The soft, eerie glow of the device lit her face in the darkness, highlighting a resolve hardened by revelations waiting to be uncovered. "Jex, power this up," Arya commanded, her voice steady, betraying none of the tension that tightened her shoulders. Jex, who had been inspecting a nearby storage locker filled with Zavar military uniforms still pristine in their preservation, nodded and approached. His hand hesitated over the interface, a mix of anticipation and dread in his eyes. "You sure about this, Arya? Once we start digging, there might be no turning back." "We lost that option the moment we landed," Arya replied without turning, her gaze fixed on the screen as it flickered to life. The air was thick with the electric buzz of ancient systems awakening after decades of slumber. On the screen, rows of text scrolled by, a historical ledger of the Zavar's final days. Arya scanned the information rapidly, each piece adding weight to her growing suspicions. Here, she pointed at a segment of the text, her finger tracing the lines of an encoded message. "This is it. The order for their last stand. And look here, the coordinates don't match any known human military records." Jex leaned in, squinting at the complex Zavar script that Arya had learned to decipher over years of obsessed study. "So, they were set up?" "More than that," Arya paused, her eyes narrowing. "They were betrayed. And not just by any ordinary foe. This was orchestrated from the inside. A coup under the guise of war." The silence that followed was heavy, filled with the ghosts of 1,000 souls whose cries for justice had been silenced by the vacuum of space. "We need to access the military logs," Arya decided, her voice breaking the silence like a ship breaching the atmosphere. The next console was trickier, protected by a security system that hadn't been powered down due to its internal power source, a failsafe against intruders. Arya's hands moved with precision, her tools a blur as she worked to bypass the security. After minutes that felt like hours, the screen welcomed them with access granted. "Got it," Arya breathed out, her relief short-lived as the gravity of their situation settled back on her shoulders. The logs were a trove of tactical deployments and battle strategies, but buried within were the communications between high-ranking Zavar commanders and their unknown conspirators. Arya's eyes flicked across the screen, each message tightening the knot in her stomach. "They didn't even see it coming," she murmured, a mix of anger and sorrow lacing her words. "Who would do this? And why?" Jex asked, his voice echoing the hollowness of the abandoned chamber. "The why is always power. The who," Arya hesitated, her instincts screaming as she put the pieces together. "The who has to be someone with enough influence to rewrite history. And cover their tracks," Jex added grimly. Arya nodded, her mind racing with the implications of their discovery. "We need proof. Hard, undeniable proof." The search led them deeper into the facility, to a sealed vault that Arya felt certain held the answers they sought. The lock was unlike any other in the facility, requiring a biometric confirmation that neither of them could fake. "Looks like we need a Zavar," Jex joked weakly, the levity a stark contrast to the tension. "No," Arya shook her head. "We need their technology." She retrieved a small, cylindrical device from her bag, the communicator she had bought from the interstellar bazaar. "This should have the commander's biometrics stored for communication security." Inserting the device into the slot beside the vault door, they held their breaths. Seconds passed until, finally, the vault accepted the biometrics and the door hissed open. Inside, amidst a wealth of cultural artifacts and military regalia, was a holodisk, its surface flickering with the promise of secrets. Arya inserted the disk into her portable reader, and the air around them filled with the holographic image of a Zavar commander, his features etched with urgency. "If you are hearing this," the commander began, his voice resonant even in its digital echo, "then know that betrayal comes not from our enemies, but from within. The coordinates we were sent to were a trap, orchestrated by." The image flickered, glitched, and then steadied. "Trust no one, not even our own. For the truth is more dangerous than any weapon we have faced." The recording ended abruptly, leaving a heavy silence in its wake. Arya and Jex exchanged a glance, the weight of their discovery settling in. Here was the proof Arya had been searching for, as solid as the steel walls that surrounded them. "This changes everything," Arya whispered, her voice a mix of triumph and dread. "Yes," Jex agreed, his usual humor dimmed by the gravity of the situation. "And now we need to decide what to do with it." As they secured the holodisk and prepared to leave the vault, Arya's resolve hardened. This was not just about avenging a species or uncovering a forgotten truth. It was about ensuring such betrayals never happened again. "We take this to the Galactic Council," she stated firmly. "Let the universe see not just the might of humanity, but its justice." Jex nodded, a newfound respect etching his features. Together, they stepped out of the vault, the echoes of their resolve ringing louder than the silence they left behind. As the Nomad hurtled through hyperspace, returning from the desolate reaches where they had unearthed the Zavar's truth, Arya and Jex were silent, each lost in their own thoughts about the implications of their discoveries. The small ship felt even more confined under the weight of the secrets they now carried. Finally, Arya broke the silence, her voice steady and determined. "We can't just bring this to the Galactic Council. Not without preparing the ground first. If we're not careful, the evidence could be suppressed, or worse, we could be silenced." Jex nodded, his usual playful demeanor replaced by a seriousness that matched the gravity of their situation. "So, what's the plan? How do we ensure this gets the attention it deserves?" "We need allies," Arya responded, her fingers tapping on the console as she brought up a list of contacts. "There are a few old friends from my academy days who are now placed in high ranks within the Council's security forces. They could help ensure our safety and the integrity of the evidence." "And what about public opinion?" Jex asked, his brow furrowed. "We leaked the story. Just enough to stir curiosity and concern. Once the public's attention is piqued, it'll be harder for the Council or anyone else to bury it." Jex considered this, then gave a small, approving nod. "I know a couple of journalists who owe me a favor. They could help spread the word discreetly." Arya smiled, a rare expression these days. "Good. Get in touch with them as soon as we land. I'll reach out to my contacts. We need all the support we can gather." The rest of the journey passed in a flurry of preparations. They drafted messages, secured data in multiple encrypted backups, and planned their next steps meticulously. By the time the Nomad touched down on the outskirts of the central galactic hub, they were ready to set their plan into motion. Stepping off the ship, Arya felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cold air of the hub. This was where it all began, and where everything would come to a head. She steeled herself, the weight of the holodisk in her pocket a constant reminder of the stakes. Jex headed off to meet with his journalist contacts, while Arya made her way to a secure meeting location where she was to rendezvous with her council allies. Each step was measured, every shadow scrutinized. Arya knew the gravity of what they were about to expose could make them targets. The meeting place was a nondescript cafe, bustling with the midday rush. Arya spotted her contacts, a pair of humans who had risen through the ranks to occupy positions of influence. They greeted her with a blend of warmth and caution, aware of the sensitive nature of their discussion. Arya wasted no time in pleasantries. "Thank you for meeting me on such short notice," she began, her voice low. "What I'm about to share must stay between us until we're ready to make it public." She then outlined everything, from the discovery of the Zavar artifact to the explosive contents of the holodisk. Her contacts listened, their expressions shifting from skepticism to shock to resolve as the magnitude of the conspiracy unfolded before them. "We're with you, Arya," one of them said once she'd finished. "This goes deeper and higher than anything we've seen. It's not just a matter of justice for the Zavar, but a matter of security and integrity for the entire council. Can we count on your support to bring this before the council?" Arya asked, her eyes searching theirs for any hint of hesitation. "You have it," the other assured her. "We'll need to strategize the best way to present this. And we'll need irrefutable proof, everything you've gathered and more." Arya nodded, feeling the first flicker of hope since they'd embarked on this mission. "We'll get you everything you need. The truth has stayed buried long enough." With their plan set, Arya left the cafe, her mind racing with the next steps. She needed to synchronize with Jex and ensure their media strategy was unfolding as planned. Public awareness was their shield against any preemptive strike by those implicated in the holodisk. Later, meeting up with Jex, Arya found him cautiously optimistic. "The word's out, at least the part we agreed on. It's catching on, people are talking, asking questions." "That's good," Arya replied, feeling the momentum building. "Let's hope it's enough to keep the wheels turning." As they prepared to leave the hub, Arya felt the eyes of the galaxy upon them, some unseen, others curious, many wary. But amidst the uncertainty, one thing was clear: they were no longer alone in their fight. The truth about the Zavar, veiled in shadows for decades, was finally stepping into the light, and with it, Arya and Jex moved forward, their resolve as unyielding as the evidence they carried. Each step was a step towards revelation, each move part of a larger strategy to ensure that the sins of the past served as lessons for the future, not secrets buried in the silence of space. The Galactic Council chamber was an arena of high ceilings and whispering echoes, a place where the fate of planets was often decided. Today, it buzzed with an undercurrent of tension that had nothing to do with ordinary politics. The rumors propagated by Jex's journalist contacts had done their work well. Representatives of various species murmured among themselves, casting glances at the human delegation, where Arya Voss stood waiting. Arya's heart beat a steady, determined rhythm. Today, she would reveal the truth about the Zavar's disappearance, a secret that had been hidden by layers of corruption and betrayal within her own species. She clutched the holodisk, the irrefutable evidence of a genocide orchestrated under the guise of galactic security. The session began with routine matters, but an electric anticipation charged the air, every delegate aware that something momentous was about to unfold. Finally, the floor was open to new business, and Arya stepped forward. "Esteemed members of the Galactic Council," Arya began, her voice resonating through the chamber, "I stand before you not just as a representative of humanity but as a harbinger of a truth that has been buried for decades." The chamber fell silent, every delegate hanging on her words. Years ago, the Zavar species was thought to have vanished at the hands of an unknown calamity. Today, I bring proof that this was no natural disaster, it was a calculated extermination, orchestrated by elements within the human military and sanctioned by those at the highest levels of power. A murmur rose among the delegates, a mix of shock and anger. Arya's human allies had secured her the opportunity to speak, but the evidence would speak louder than her words. She inserted the holodisk into the viewer, and the room darkened as holographic images flickered to life. The figure of the Zavar commander appeared, recounting the betrayal and showing data and communications that detailed the trap set for his people. The evidence was damning, a clear manipulation of trust and power. The individuals responsible believed they could erase an entire species to prevent a war, manipulating fear and prejudice to justify their actions. They were wrong, Arya declared, the weight of history in her voice. As the recording ended, a stunned silence filled the chamber. It was broken by the representative from Vorinth, a species that had always viewed humanity with suspicion. "How do we know this is not another manipulation?" "A human trick," the Vorinthian challenged, his voice a harsh buzz. Arya met his gaze. "Because we have nothing to gain from exposing our own sins, except the chance to correct them. We seek accountability, transparency, and justice, not just for the Zavar but for all species who look to this council for guidance." The human delegation was visibly uncomfortable, the higher-ups exchanging glances, but it was too late for backroom deals or silencing tactics. One by one, other delegates spoke, some calling for immediate sanctions against humanity, others advocating for a thorough investigation. The chamber became a crucible of debate, with Arya's revelations serving as the catalyst for change. Finally, the president of the council, a wise old Char named Kilos, called for order. "We will convene a special committee to investigate these claims thoroughly," he announced, his voice firm. "Justice must be served, not just swiftly but fairly." Arya nodded, satisfied. As the session adjourned, reporters swarmed around her, their questions a cacophony of curiosity and concern. Amid the chaos, Jax found her, his eyes shining with pride. "You did it, Arya. You actually did it." Arya smiled, weary but resolute. "We did it, Jax. And this is just the beginning. The real work starts now, ensuring such atrocities can never happen again." As they left the chamber, Arya knew the road ahead would be fraught with challenges. Her revelations had shaken the foundations of galactic politics, and the reverberations would be felt for years to come. But for the first time in a long while, she felt a spark of hope that from the ashes of past horrors, a new, more just galaxy could arise. Outside, the stars awaited, indifferent to the struggles of the beings below. Yet tonight, they seemed to shine a little brighter, reflecting the light of a truth long hidden but now revealed. And under their watchful gaze, Arya Voss, once just an archaeologist, now a catalyst for change, stepped forward into a future fraught with uncertainty but buoyed by the possibility of redemption and reconciliation. As the last echoes of the tumultuous council session faded away, Arya Voss and Jax Maurin stood on the steps of the Galactic Council building, the burden of their mission lifting yet anchoring them with new responsibilities. The crowd that had gathered was a tapestry of species and colors, each individual and news drone buzzing with the revelations that had just been laid bare. "Today, we stood not just for the Zavar but for every voice that has been silenced by the darkness of deceit," Arya addressed the assembly, her voice amplified to reach even the outer fringes of the gathered crowd. "What we have unveiled is not merely a tragedy of the past but a clarion call for vigilance and integrity in the stewardship of our galaxy." The crowd murmured in agreement, many nodding their heads, their expressions resolute. Arya's words had stirred something fundamental, a collective realization of the need for unity and the importance of safeguarding their shared future. Jax, who usually shied away from the spotlight, took a step forward, his gaze sweeping over the crowd. "We've shown that even the mightiest can fall when they sever the roots of justice and truth. Let this be a lesson to all who wield power, misuse it, and it will not only tarnish your legacy but also awaken the guardians of righteousness." The message resonated, and cheers erupted from the crowd, a sound that carried the weight of change and the promise of a new dawn. In the days that followed, Arya and Jax found themselves at the heart of a whirlwind of activity. The special committee formed by the council moved swiftly, buoyed by the public's outcry and the irrefutable evidence that had been presented. High-ranking military officers and officials implicated in the cover-up were detained, their trials set to be as public as the council session that had exposed them. Amidst this, Arya worked closely with the Zavar survivors, who had come forward from their hidden enclaves, encouraged by the galaxy's reaction to the truth. Their stories, filled with pain yet underscored by resilience, were recorded and broadcasted, ensuring that the memory of what had happened would not fade away again. "It's not just about remembering the past," Arya explained during a broadcast, her face a mask of solemnity. "It's about sculpting a future where this can never happen again. We are setting up memorials, not only on human planets but across the galaxy, as reminders of the cost of silence and the value of vigilance." Her efforts were supported by educational reforms that included a more comprehensive history of the galaxy's diverse cultures and the dark chapters of its past. These reforms were designed not to provoke guilt but to foster understanding and cooperation among the galaxy's myriad inhabitants. Meanwhile, Jax took a different but equally vital route. He coordinated with the galactic media, giving interviews and participating in discussions that kept the public engaged and informed. "We must keep the dialogue alive," he would often say. "Change comes slowly, and it's easy to slip back into complacency. We won't let that happen." Their work, however, was not without challenges. There were those who resisted the new changes, clinging to old prejudices or fearing the upheaval that true justice might bring. Threats and sabotage attempts were not uncommon, but Arya and Jax, along with their allies, faced each challenge with unwavering determination. As the galaxy gradually adapted to the revelations and reforms, the annual Day of Reflection approached, a day traditionally meant to reflect on past conflicts and the lessons learned. This year, however, it took on a new significance. It was designated as a day of remembrance for the Zavar and a celebration of the galaxy's renewed commitment to justice and truth. On that day, Arya stood before a newly erected monument, a sculpture that intertwined various elements representing the galaxy's species, with the Zavar at its heart. The inscription at its base, a quote from Arya's speech to the council, read, "In the light of truth, we find the strength to heal and the courage to forge ahead." As the ceremony concluded, Arya felt a gentle hand on her shoulder. Turning, she saw an old Zavar, his eyes brimming with unshed tears. "You have given us something more precious than justice," he said softly. "You have given us a place in the galaxy's heart, and for that, we are eternally grateful." Arya's eyes mirrored his emotion. "This is your place by right, not by our giving," she replied, her voice steady despite the swell of emotions. "Together, we go forward." The sun set behind the monument, casting long shadows that stretched across the gathering, a symbolic reminder of the dark that had been overcome and the light that lay ahead. And as the stars began to twinkle in the twilight sky, Arya and Jax, surrounded by friends and allies, looked towards the horizon, ready to meet whatever challenges and opportunities the future might bring.